Lord, thank you for this experience. And we simply ask that in these next few moments, you would help to have our mind's attention and our heart's affection focused on you and what you would like to accomplish. In Jesus' name, and all of God's people said, Amen. Well, if I was left to my own devices and how I was basically wired to do this whole ministry leadership gig, this is what I would look like. Heroic solo leader, right? Yeah. And that's what we're going to talk about, is a follow-on from Wes's inspiration, and that is the journey from heroic solo leader to generative team leader. Now, I want to make sure you know that I'm not the only one prone to wander into the wilderness of heroic solo leadership if left to my own devices. All of my Wave 1 members are prone to this. So here they are. There's George. There, look. Wow, look at Travis. Okay, man. There's Mike Schreiner. Okay. Ron Watts. You go. There's Dale. All right. Jacob Armstrong, you are a superhero. Wow. There's Wes. Oh, man. That's a little scary. Okay.
Keep that guy out of the
Wow. Bring it down. Okay. Now, I want to mention, really quickly so we know what we're talking about. What is the heroic leadership mindset? Here's the heroic leadership mindset. I make all the decisions. I solve all the problems. I have all the answers. I set the direction, mission, and vision. Amen? Now, I do want to say that I began my journey in spiritual leadership as a heroic solo leader because that was the way I was taught. I mean, you were winning. That was your job description. That's what you're supposed to do. And so many of us who were trained, particularly in my generation, had to be untrained, deprogrammed, move through a whole different formation process. And so that, though, if you ever wander into those particular bullet points, even if you were not trained that way, you are dangerously becoming a heroic solo leader. And what are the results of that? Lack of trust among your team, stifling of innovation in your organization, bottlenecking of decision making, creation of silos and competition, no significant growth and development of team members, and a burnout or blowout of the solo leader. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but just kind of by general consensus of verbal affirmation, how many of you know what that feels like at times? Amen. And none of us want to live in that place. None of us want a ministry, a church, any organization to feel like that, act like that, be like that. However, the antidote to that is generative team leadership. And that's what this looks like. Collaboration over competition. Empowered, growing, and developing team members. Increased innovation, creativity, and problem-solving skills. Better decision makers throughout the organization. More nimble and agile organization. Higher engagement, and a more sustainable pace for everyone. So we will have a show of hands here. How many of you would love to lead that kind of organization? Yes, obviously. So how do you get there? How do you make the switch? Well, this is how you do it. Be willing to embrace the mess. Can you get an amen, Wes? Amen. All right. Create a permission-giving environment. become a laboratory of experimentation, make room for failure, resource and expect development and growth, develop a coaching mindset of leadership, move from control to trust, and grow psychological safety on the team, or teams plural. Now let me just take a few moments on some of that. You've already heard about Wes describing what it's like to go ahead and embrace the mess and be okay with the mess. I do want to specifically encourage all of us to create these permission-giving environments. Bay Hope is a high permission-giving environment, from the lay board of church governance to the way that the executive director team and operational leadership team on staff works, down through the director level, as well as the senior directors, coordinators, and everybody on staff. It's a very permission-giving organization. Now, there is healthy, holy accountability on the backside of that, and RADs, as we reflected just to do on the backside of that permission-giving. But there is one thing we've never given permission to do around here, and that is a glow-in-the-dark Easter egg hunt. We were way too smart to even think about that one. Okay, so, terrible idea, awful. Okay. Also, I want to say that I do feel like Bay Hope Church is a laboratory of experimentation. We will take a flyer on most anything. And in fact, during the period of the pandemic, when we had to really shift gears and create a whole online presence in a very multifaceted way during that process. Pastor Keith, you remember some of that. I told our online campus pastor, Andy Mage, at the time, I said, you just be a mad scientist in the laboratory with beakers and Bunsen burners all over the place, just to experiment the crap out of this thing. Fail. If you don't fail and fail quickly, something's wrong. All right, high permission giving environment. So again, you got to make room for that. We celebrate the failures around here. And on resourcing and expecting development and growth, I do it. You've got to resource it. You've got to advocate for money in the budget to get your people to conferences, to workshops, to have consultants come. We've had a ton of consultants come here and work with us. We've sent tons of people off to conferences. You don't spend that money in the budget. That's an investment in the budget. Amen? Yeah. Now, just one more thing on this. Develop a coaching mindset of leadership. I don't have a resource list today, but I'll go ahead and create a resource list to have for you about a lot of good text on how to develop a coaching mindset as a leader. And that's more about what we try and engender in leadership around here. I'll reference a little bit of that later. So move from control to trust, and that's obviously where Patrick Lencioni starts with the 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Trust. Now, when I talk about growing psychological safety on the team, you need to do a thorough deep dive, if you really want to understand this, into Project Aristotle. How many of you know automatically what I mean when I say Project Aristotle? All right, there's 2 of you who know Project Aristotle. Project Aristotle was the work of Google's People Operations Department. It's kind of their fancy name for HR, but Google, multi-thousands of employees around the world. Well, their People Operations Department underwent the expenditure of millions of dollars over 2+ years, enlisting industrial psychologists, sociologists, engineers, and others to help them identify the characteristics of highly productive teams, high impact teams. Google has tons of teams at all times. And they began to get a growing sense of frustration at Google about teams that would produce these remarkable projects and these other teams that would flounder. And they began to ask themselves, what is it that this team was doing that this team wasn't doing? And they studied this all ways that you could possibly envision with Yale researchers and others who came in to help them on this issue. And they analyzed 180 teams over the course of this 2+ years. And they thought about every conceivable attribute you could possibly study. And they thought, well, maybe it's the most intelligent people when we get them together. Nope. Maybe it's the most highly technically proficient people when we get them to. Nope. Maybe it's those with the best skill sets. Nope. Maybe it's those who were socializing outside of the team meeting. Nope. Maybe it's those who are in proximity to each other in terms of departments or within. Nope. Now they did, after this 2-year process from 2010 to 2012, come up with a set of what were the particular variables. I'm only going to share one variable with you right now because it was the one top, overarching variable that if that didn't exist, none of the other variables came into play. And that variable was psychological safety. Now, they found that there were 4 levels of psychological safety on teams: inclusion, learning, contribution, and challenge. That first level, inclusion, a team member would ask when joining that team, maybe not out loud, but this is what your people ask, am I really included here? Do I belong here? Is there a place for me around this table? And a lot of that's unspoken hidden agendas that get communicated. But they found that that was the number one entree into creating psychological safety on teams, was a sense of inclusion. Everybody belongs at this table and we're all in this together, and no one gets to kind of play a superiority card on someone else. The second, therefore, was, okay then, if I belong here, is this a place where I can learn? Can I let down my defenses? Can I ask dumb questions? Can I really be a learner in this place, or do I have to act like I have my act all together? And they said that then, because they said this is a sequential process, the researchers did. That then leads to contribution. Well, if I'm included here and it's a safe place to learn, well then what can I do now? I can contribute. I can speak into this. I can add my thoughts. I can speak up if these other 2 things exist. And what they found was if inclusion, learning, and contribution exist, then the gold standard exists on a healthy team. I can challenge what's going on here. I can challenge someone, appropriately challenge, but I can actually say, hey, and what's the phrase we use? Help me understand. I'm going to challenge what's going on here. Okay, so there's whole huge articles, Harvard Business case studies on all of that process, but I just wanted to quickly mention that. Okay, and here are what they found were the attributes of a psychologically safe team: a safe place to share ideas and opinions, a creative place to take risks, an atmosphere of humble, open, teachable cooperation, a judgment-free zone for brainstorming and experimentation, a place where any question is safe, and a team where people stay longer and others clamor to join. They found that that was a key indicator. The team didn't want to stop its work. And other people in Google said, how do I get on that team? Now, don't you want your place to be like that? Yeah. So, therefore, what can you do to create psychological safety on your teams? 1, you model by being vulnerable. And I hope you've heard so far in every person who has delivered the main addresses Have you noticed something? High vulnerability. High vulnerability. Be open and approachable. Be aware of biases and blind spots in your leadership. Ask more, say less. In fact, that's the title of one of the best coaching books out there. Ask more, say less. Admit your mistakes. Admit you don't have all the answers. That's hard for me. But I've now been broken of that. I'm finally there. It took me, I think, 35 out of my 40 years of this ministry vocational gig that I'm in. And encourage agency for everyone on the team. Encourage agency for everyone on the team. Now, those were just quick bullet points that we flew through because what we really want to do is to create some very practical sharing and then some Q&A about how different leaders and churches in this room have handled the journey from heroic solo leadership to generative team leadership. So I want to invite the panel to go ahead and come on up here and join me. Wes and Taylor, Jacob and Mark, Ron and Brett, come on up and join me. Just to kind of get going here, before we dive into any of the general questions and then the individual Q&A, just kind of a quick intro, who you are, your church, okay? And maybe how long you've been there. So we'll start, Brett, with you.
Was this? Okay, we're good. Hey, I'm Brett. I'm at a church called LaCroix that's in southeast Missouri. I'm the teaching pastor and spiritual formation pastor, and I've been there like 16 and a half, coming up on 17 years.
And I'm Ron Watts at the same church, and I've been there 37 years. Brett's going to be the next senior pastor, and we've worked together all these years, so that's awesome.
Oh, and mention your wave. Wave 3, wave 1.
Wave 1.
Okay.
I'm Taylor Foley. I'm at Grace Church. I'm our executive pastor there. I've been there almost 15 years, and wave 3, best wave.
Wes Olds, wave 1. I'm a cog pal.
Hey guys, I'm Jacob Armstrong. I'm at Providence Church, which is just outside of Nashville. I've been there 18 years, and I'm in wave 1.
Hey, I'm Mark Youngman. I'm in wave 3, and I'm also at Providence Church with my friend Jacob. I'm in my 10th year now there. I'm pastor of discipleship and ministries.
Okay. All right, and in no particular order here, whatever you feel you want to dive into, just where have you experienced some of your learning moments along this journey from heroic solo leadership to generative team leadership? What's that like, your journey in your cultures?
All right, I'll take a stab at it. So this was a quote that was shared from Craig a couple of years ago, actually, that said, when choosing a team, you need to pick people who are willing and able to bear the burden of leadership with you. And this was something new for me because I felt like I just had to pick a team because I was supposed to have a team, but I still did all the work. And so the team meetings actually meant we would be done and I would have more work to do, but I said, I have a team, so we're great. It was not generative at all. And so that has been a huge learning. And then on top of that, the time leading up to building that team does feel like you're doubling or tripling the amount of time of your work. However, the payoff has been huge. Recently, we had a staff person who we were trying to coach how to coach someone on their team. And it was a lot of hours with this person, how to coach. Wes said to me, he said, Taylor, you're getting your money's worth of how much we pay this person for what they're going to learn in the future. And that has been true for us, yeah.
Yeah, other thoughts or learnings along the way?
Yeah, I think just a snapshot of how our church was a new church 18 years ago, but it was started out of, actually Mark and I were both in it, a SLI group that was coached by Brian for people who were feeling a potential call to start new ministries in the Tennessee Conference of the United Methodist Church. So we had a lot of that in us, that desire. It was really birthed out of that, but I had way more of the description of a solo hero inside of me that it took a long time with lots of trying to even get there. Mark joining us, over 10 years ago was a big help in that. But about 4 years ago, we changed our whole leadership structure that we have 3 co-equal leaders. So Mark is a lead pastor, I'm a lead pastor, and we have another pastor, our executive pastor. We've created 2 teams that fit the mission of the network. We have a more team and a maturing team. We call it a deeper team. We just have a different word for it. And we're seeing, so we've been in that work intently for about 4.5 years. And I would say that we are just now seeing much beautiful fruit at 4.5 years of really working operational teams in the way that a lot of us have been talking about.
Awesome.
This fall marks 10 years working with SLI and brought the whole team concept. I am a recovering heroic solo leader. It's all I learned. It's all what we modeled, our generation. In fact, we were told to be that way in many respects, right? And SLI brought a whole new way of doing that. And I would say Brett, temperamentally, is more of a collaborative leader. And teams just kind of flow from, and that's just who he is. I had to learn a lot. But I would say that it's transformed our culture. And I don't think we'd have got it through the pandemic and all of the stuff, disaffiliation, without the team. The team was huge. And I wouldn't do it any other way. Also, we have the operational team, but we have an executive team. Well, before we operated under a traditional model, I would meet with my executive pastor. We would decide stuff. And we had really some rough patches with staff, to say the least. Our staff is healthier now than ever because it's led by a team.
I think some of that, like temperamentally, I'm more of a relational, flat organization. So what I have to work on is knowing that I still have to lead the team. And I come from and some of that's probably personality, some of it's probably generational, where title and platform makes you morally suspect. Right? And so for me, it can feel like doing something wrong to lead. Does that, like...
And, lean into that, unpack that a little bit more.
I listened to a lot of Rage Against the Machine.
Okay.
And, and I mean, no joke, like that generation, like if you just take music, their success led to like existential crisis. Thousands of people showed up and they're like, well, this is wrong. This is what I was criticizing. Right. And so and so sometimes for maybe it's just personality, sometimes it's generation, whatever, the wanting to lead feels wrong. And so that's something that I've had to work through.
Okay.
I'll chime in that one of the opportunities that we found to grow into more team leadership is to take advantage of emergencies and to try to push that to the team as far out as we can so that they can learn the skills to lead. Yeah. And so it's like, who's the best person to make this decision? I could make the decision. Taylor could make the decision. Pastor Casey could make the decision. But who does it really need to go to? Yeah. So we have to follow that chain of relational connections down to push it to the place and empower them to make
never
the decision.
waste a crisis.
Never waste a crisis. So the hurricane was a big deal for us. The pandemic was a big deal. And this tension that y'all are talking about is, there are times in emergencies where the team does look for the leader to just make a decision. We had that at COVID a lot because my epidemiology degree has not come through yet. And so neither has my colleagues. And so we had sometimes people, we would just be looking at each other like, well, what to do? And then I think Taylor was like, you just got to decide, But the team helped that decision happen. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. That's another epic fail I could share about taking reservations for Christmas Eve so that we could appropriately socially distance. And then 40% of the people who made reservations didn't show up, and we were turning people away left and right. And that was another epic fail, but we did it together.
Okay.
Well, Matthew, what I've loved is like the slow, hard work of the process to get to where we are, as Jacob described. That we first began learning a lot of processes around team 17, 20, however many years ago that was with Brian Sims. And I've had like opportunities to dabble in team building in other settings that I've been in, but it does feel like over the last few years is the first time where, I think it's a lot of the persistence of Craig and SLI that like we've known it, we've had it simmering for so many years, but are just now really seeing some real fruit and some real life in it. And it's just like a exponential energy that comes from that.
Cool.
Throughout the church.
So are there any particular systems or resources or kind of processes that you have done to get there or that you currently do that reinforce that culture of generative teams? Anything real concrete?
Have you heard of SLI? That's like that. That's actually the tools. I mean, I'm being facetious, I guess, but that is actually the thing. It's like, oh no, this is actually what we've been wanting to do. But being our operational teams, really as they are right now, are like 1 year in, and just beginning to see the fruit of that in other teams developing, maps really beginning to align in a much more intentional way. Has been really beautiful to get to see that, but we're still really early on in that. So I guess the process is staying in it.
Yeah. Just to tack on that, for what all of you are doing. So I'm doing 8 hours a month with my crew. Mark is, Pastor Angela is. So as we pass this down to our team, we've already been modeled. It's hard not to model that everyone knows at whatever time each week, I'm disappearing on a Zoom call for 2 hours. So I think that's the, practical part of it is now we're engaging that with, 20 more people. And some of them, a handful of them are now engaging that with their folks. So that's the practical thing we do is I do it and then I'm leading that. And then the expectation is as we go along, they'll be doing it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do is try to slow down enough to stop and build a team. And we've had this conversation recently with the Bayhope invited us to partner with them to help a group of incarcerated high school girls. And the opportunity is so exciting that we wanted to run ahead, and yet we kept telling ourselves, no, not until we have a team leader who builds a team who then does it. Because we wanted to run, our hearts were pulled into that, but we have forced ourselves to build a team. And so that slowdown piece is important, I think, for the long haul. It slows things down short term, but it speeds everything up, and it's just better to empower others to lead, because otherwise then the decisions come back to already overtaxed leaders just because it's a great opportunity, and then in 6 months they hate their life. And so that's one thing I want to share. And the other is that this is a little bit what I was talking about in my talk, is that to view myself as somebody that's coaching, and you mentioned this as a coaching kind of culture, and that's what we're trying to build. And so because I want to solve the problem, or whatever the issue is. I got an answer. I got 20 answers if you want one. And so, but I'm learning to lead with questions. And I found this article that Jesus asked 307 questions. And, you stop and think about that for a minute. The creator of heaven and earth asked 307 questions. I think he knows what's going on. So why is he asking the question? He's drawing it out of people. And so Craig has been coaching me when I show up in our children's center, I'm not there to solve any problems or do anything. I'm there to empower the leaders based on our vision, mission, and values. And so I want to ask questions that go around that. Okay, if you go this way, how does that reflect that we're, God-centered, people-focused, or team-based? Tell me that kind of thing. And then, part of your question is about culture. And Taylor is a master culture builder, designer. And he's going to tell you a little bit about that, no pressure. But one of my leadership coaches told me this, that culture eats strategy for lunch every single day. And so the culture is what, I heard you talk about, Matthew, that Taylor is now going to expand on.
Okay. So we all are culture builders. I reinforce this with our staff, that really as soon as we get up in the morning, we can set the tone for our own lives, our own days, but also the teams that we lead and the cultures that we create. And so how we've sort of pushed this down into our teams, if someone comes up and says, I have this great idea for a ministry, and we've had this happen, and usually those people say, and I want you to do this, our pushback is, well, we can't start a ministry and we cannot continue a ministry without having a team. That's sort of how we deflect it, but then it challenges people to jump in on a team. And so when building those teams, there's 3 requirements for building a team. They have to love Jesus. These are real simple requirements too, right? They have to love Jesus, they have to love you, and they have to love the church. And that order is actually important. Sometimes we feel like, we need to have a devil's advocate on our team, except the devil has enough of a foothold in this world, so why in the world are we giving him more space in that? And so then that's how we sort of evaluate ministries if they are continuing on with a team. But so once, and Mark, to add to what you said, once these teams are rolling, we do really lean on a lot of these practices that we've learned from SLI, where there's covenant living, where there's feedback systems through RADs and high communication. And we've created these accountability sheets where we're asking people about their faithfulness and fruitfulness, their faithfulness to God and their fruitfulness that they're seeing in their ministries. But what that's done is set a culture for our teams to recognize what the real focus is. Because vision leaks, values leak, mission leaks real easy. And so we have to constantly, in those team settings, remind people what our focus is.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, if I could ask, how do you know you're winning at this? What does a win look like in a generative team culture? Like, this is a generative team culture. What does that look like?
Okay, shy people, I'll go first
For
again.
me,
You
for
can do
me,
it.
go ahead, Wes.
For us, thank you, Jacob. For us, it's I'm discovering we're starting to have more and more of the right problems. So the problems are not personality driven or somebody's got a little kingdom that they're trying to build. The problems are, we've got one of our leaders that we are fearful has relapsed. That's just real time, and we're working on that today, even with the team that is here, to try to figure out how to address that. We have too many people that came to our job fair that they weren't satisfied that they were able to fulfill the actual mission, and they were. People got jobs, but we're not in the job business. We're in the disciple making business. And so I was so proud of our team. I sat into their rad, and they were like, "We don't like this. We had 750 people. We need to get, we need to get less. We need to help fewer people get the right kind of step up in their life so that they can move forward." And I was just like, "Wow, we could have 1,000 next time." And that's not success. It looks good on paper, and I feel good about my ego, but it actually doesn't help anybody if we can't handle that. And so those are the right kind of problems and the right kind of things that come to us. And so those are a few of the things that we need.
Right?
One thing that I've later, Jacob. One thing that I think I've seen that has been good is there are more people thinking about the whole, and fewer people just thinking about their passion area, which you want them to be passionate about their thing, but there are more people that recognize that there's a whole system playing together, and so you get more movement between things, and less just like my goal is for more people to come back to my thing. I think that's been a big win.
Jacob.
That's what I was going to say, Brett. That was good. It really was, but I'll give an example. So, for instance, what I think Brett's saying is since we have teams of people that are spending time, hours a week in the mission, in the vision, in the values, and the repetition of that allows for me, the win is seeing decision-making being based on those things instead of, what your tendency might be, or your personality, or your department, or whatever. So an example for that, for me, yesterday, our director of hospitality, Stephanie, was here. She's an amazing high-capacity leader. She's been with us for 10 plus years. She was here yesterday to help hopefully make our experience of doing this in Nashville an aligned experience. So she's been with us a long time, and she's wonderful. But a difference, this is a real small example, but when we were doing some things around Christmas Eve, I heard her making decisions around her team, in our bigger team, that were like about how we were going to serve communion at Christmas Eve. That was based on, she was using value language, mission and vision, rather than, I think in the past we would have thought efficiency, all kinds of different things. So for us, having a huge shift, we changed the mission of our church to making more and maturing disciples. And so making that shift and then living it out, and doing that in a spiritual environment. Like, I don't want to lose sight of that we're not just talking about some kind of business technique for gathering folks together. And anytime, if I get the microphone at this, and I said it last time, I just want you guys to know who are new here, this thing started because the Holy Spirit fell on a group of people, like literally put us on the floor, and gave us a dream for something. And so, like, in the midst of that is all the creativity and flexibility and imagination that happens in a spiritual movement in which we need you all to be a part of for it to work.
Let me jump in on this. So one thing that we've witnessed is as leaders, when we go away, oftentimes we're having to check our phones or whatnot, like what mess is awaiting us when we get home. Some of us are feeling this right now. A shift that we've seen is there's 3 phases. It's that phase. The second phase is everything's just been status quo. And then where we're seeing the win is the third phase is when I get back, I have to catch up, because our teams are sometimes even outpacing our operational teams, and we're having to bring them back a little bit or catch up. And so that's been a win for us, that sort of, as you're saying, Brett, the big picture has been seen, and people can move on, and the mission's going on, and it's not up to me as a leader.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on what Brett said, we see less siloing. We used to battle siloing, and it was because I think there just wasn't that team culture, so every department was on their own. And that's just not been a problem lately. It is beautiful.
Great.
I think part of a win is when a team member takes what's going on in the operation team, begins to do a new thing, and it actually exposes some areas of conflict that they weren't seeing, or some areas of need that they were not necessarily seeing, because they're pushing through with this new thing, and so it stirs things up. Another win that I saw was, I shared this with my Wave recently. I think my last operation team, one of my team members was wanting to kind of cut a ministry, not a member, a ministry, and and she wanted, but we had been talking about it. And she said, "Can I take this to the team?" Which, that was a win right there, right? Can I take this to the team was a win, and then when she brought it to the team, we spent half an hour discussing this, and we had conflict. Like, there was tension in the room, and it was, and somewhere in the back of my mind, Craig Robertson was like, woohoo, that is what we want to have. And what was so beautiful about it is, we got to a good place in the conversation, didn't resolve everything, but when we were moving on, to be able to say, for me to be able to have a moment and say, this was amazing. This was awesome. We're doing something here. We're like in the work together, and it's because we spent the last year developing covenant and discipleship together.
Yeah, George, what kind of meeting do you call that? A noisy meeting. That's right. Okay. So those are some wins that give evidence to the reality that a generative team culture is being constructed. If I were to ask this next question in maybe a polite way, I'd say, well, but what have been some of your miscalculations over the years? But let me just say, what have been some of your total screw-ups over the years? I mean, where have you gained the most learning because of something that went really bad?
Wes?
You may share another one? Okay, well, I got plenty where that came from. We could talk all day about how we've screwed things up. So one thing would be when we've recruited the wrong people to be on a team, because we just need a team. So we're like, well, do you have a pulse? Okay, you're good. So then that never works. And we check the box, but we end up with trouble. And so that'd be one caution, I would say. And we've done that a lot, out of zeal. So now it's not only you have to start a team, but you have to start a team with the right people, and it takes an application process in some situations, and then they have to build a covenant, and then they have to have a map, and then they can start with whatever they got to do. But then it's going to go for the long haul.
I think one of ours is when we forget to use the teams that we have. So we've got teams that meet and decide things, and then you've got like a staff that does things all week. And so, like a recent one that isn't catastrophic, but could have been better, is like in our lead team, we were working on a wildly important goal coming up, and we adopted a small group study, and we said this is what the small groups are going to do, and but we have a small group team. So instead of including them in that discussion, we just kicked the decision out to them instead of some sort of, and then we're fielding calls from our best and most devoted small group leaders, basically saying, "What the heck are you doing?" And you're like, okay. And so that would have been a good situation to utilize the teams that we have. We've said that they lead these things.
Yeah.
And so again, not catastrophic, but that would have been better. I think maybe another quick thing is sometimes, and this is my personality, the collaborative thing, sometimes I try to get all the work done when everybody's in the room, and that makes teams go really, really slow. You put nimble and something else up there, nimble and agile, and sometimes teams are the opposite of nimble and agile. And one of the things that I can do that slows them down is I wait till everybody is in the room to make every decision, instead of a little hack is giving somebody or a couple people assignments.
Yeah.
Go work on this, bring what you've done back to the team, and we'll talk about it. We'll check your work. And that speeds it up. And I don't use that near enough.
Okay. Any other screw-ups, Wes? Okay.
I'll go. I've been following Wes since I was 6 years old. So, yeah, that's right. This is real time, and I've actually talked to a couple of y'all about this. We're really struggling with, and we're very passionate about being a multi-generational church. We're really struggling with giving voice to those in Gen Z and leading them and getting them up to speed and regulating our own expectations. The language that y'all, we had a year-long internship with someone who was in this age demographic, and there are a lot of mistakes on this person's end. There are a lot of mistakes that we just screwed up. Just being honest. And what we're discovering is, how do we lean in? How do we make an on-ramp bigger for rising leaders and upcoming leaders, instead of just having these expectations of, well, you've been going here all your life, shouldn't you know? And we just make assumptions. And George gave this piece of advice to me several years ago. He said, one of the weaknesses that we can have in leadership and ministry is having ambiguity and assumption when leading other people. That we're just ambiguous of our expectations, and we just assume that people will know better. And I think about that all the time in my own leadership.
Yeah.
Hold on. We're talking about failure, so I'm an expert. So along with that, one of the things we've discovered is not everybody has adaptive capabilities and giftings. And so if you put a person that's a high task person on an adaptive team, you're going to crush their soul. And we had this at the Rock Church in Lexington. We had a guy that could fix the furnace, and he was an organist. And so, he was this guy that was all in, and I'm like, awesome. So we put him on our adaptive operational team, and he brought a novel with him every week, and he just read for 8 hours a month. And he was a calm, cool guy. I was like, do you like being on this team? He's like, well, I love being able to read. And then he said, but if I had my druthers, I would just go practice for Sunday, and then I can go downstairs and I can continue to repair our furnace. And I'm like, why don't you do that? And so he did, but I've repeated that mistake over and over again with people who are high technical, because we got to have those people to do stuff, but they might not sit on the operational team that does adaptive work all the time.
Yeah, I think what Wes is hitting on is the mistake I make over and over, and it's not understanding and clearly communicating the purpose of the team. So like in the SLI model, there's task teams, which execute tasks. There's an operational team, which is what we're talking about. And there's a directional team, if I'm getting this right, or a legislative team, which might be more like your board or your church council. And if you need to make sure, I need to make sure that everybody understands the importance of all three of those teams, how critical they are. But if you get them mixed up, and so I was thinking, Angela, of our last operational team together, and somehow we literally started talking about what kind of screen we were going to be using in the overflow room on Easter. And I knew that we were off, from what that group is supposed to be doing. And and I'm not really good at this, that's why, as the leader, coach kind of person in that setting, I got us to that place. And once we do that, we're talking about the color of the carpet, you know what I mean? Or the, what kind of flowers we're going to have, and we're like not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's a leadership growth thing, and I'm still living into that. I find myself making that mistake where it's like, oh, we're not doing we set aside this time to be over here, not in the day-to-day realm, and I got us there somehow. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing some mistakes and miscalculations along the way. Some of you know that for 10 years pre-pandemic, Grace Church and Bay Hope put on the Real Ideas Conference, and some of you attended that over the years. And I always thought that if we ever do something like that again, we should call it the Real Bad Ideas Conference. Come and learn what not to do because of what we screwed up. So I appreciate you guys being open and vulnerable to that. What we want to do is shift gears now and allow you to just kind of popcorn questions from where you are. Mike Mage has a mic, so he's going to be walking around, just get his attention. And, go ahead and let us know who you're directing that to, unless it's just a general question to the panel, all right? So here comes Mike. George?
It's a real question. Quit laughing. My two pastors are laughing at me. All right, so here's the question. So how do you get? So you and your staff, your leadership team, are on board with the shift from heroic solo leadership to generative team leadership. Okay, we're going to practice some new ways. But the 80% of the people that sit in the chairs on Sunday morning, they don't get it. And so Jacob and I were talking during the break that they have a kind of plurality of leadership with these three lead pastors, but they keep looking to Jacob because he founded the church. So what are the ways in which you push this? We're a team-based church. How do you push this into the pews? How does that get lived out? It could be hacks that do that, or it could be high-level principled things. How do we get team-based into the DNA of the people that are sitting out here?
I don't know that we've intentionally set about that. We could, but most recently did a sermon in March, 5th anniversary of the pandemic, to woo people back to in-person worship. Because we didn't have church online prior to the pandemic. In 1 week we had it, and everybody went online. Well, maybe like some of your churches, lots and lots of people from our church have parked there, and they could be in person. They need to be in person. So when I preached the sermon, it came from our team. Months of discussion. And I even showed a picture of our team and said, this is coming from us. And it just felt good to do that. And we've seen a number of people shift, but I don't know if people caught that. And I can't say we did this intentionally, but it was good to be able to say, this talk that I'm giving today comes from our team.
Share about the results.
Georgia,
and we've had, he wanted me to share. We've had 200 people shift from online to in person. Wow. So it's been a win.
You want to say more about that? I think your question, George, is like a discipleship question in my mind. Like it kind of doesn't matter to me if people are coming to the church and they see the person on stage and, that is kind of a big part of our front door, obviously, and draw to the church. And I think what we're seeing is as we grow as disciples, if they're engaged in it, if they're engaged in the discipleship process, they're going to be connecting with everybody on the team and seeing what leadership really looks like in the church, and no longer depend on just one leader to look to the entire time.
I wonder, I'm not sure if this answers it, George, but I wonder too if this idea of team and a bigger picture is about community, and that's one of the biggest felt needs right now in our society around an anxious generation, epidemic of loneliness, that we can use the language of team as a place to build community. One of our thriving teams that we have is our outreach team, because they're based around community and accountability and caring for, praying with one another, and so I wonder if that's maybe the draw of bringing in the other 80%.
Yeah, Trevor?
Thanks, guys. I have two questions, and thanks, appreciate that. I'm like, am I on? Maybe I just need to be louder. In my own ministry, in my life cycle, where we're at with this, I'm at Taylor, where you were talking about it. At the beginning, it feels like 2 to 3 times the amount of work to start it all. Like I'm on our operational team that we're building at COH, and then I got several teams. I got teams coming out of my ears right now, and it's great. I can see the fruit of it in some areas, but right now it's a ton of extra work just trying to get it up and going. The challenge I'm finding is, I know some teams are task, some teams are operational. I'm having a hard time with some of my volunteer leaders. Like I don't know how to get over the 8-hour requirement hurdle, where some of my lay people like totally cannot pull that off. How did you guys figure that out with non-staff members? Does that make sense?
So we keep the standards high, and we might provide an on-ramp to get there, but people's schedules loosen up 6 months later. And so by the time you get to, next February, they should be able to, what are you doing next? Well, I'm too busy. Well, okay. What are you doing next February? Well, I got a funeral I got to go to. Yeah. Well, how do you know that? They're still alive. So it's just logic. The other thing I talk about is comparison. Like we have a traditional choir, and they rehearse, and then sing about 17 to 20 hours a month to do an anthem that's already been written and is recorded. And so if we're going to try to figure out how to make disciples of a third grader in Cape Coral, it's going to take at least that much time, if not more. Okay. And so I found if just reason, let's think about this together. And then what Taylor's talking about, this particular team, our outreach team, they've built such a community together. They want to be together. It becomes contagious, and it spreads through good gossip. Oh my gosh, you got to be on that team. You want to be on that team. It's the most exciting team, and we do these things together. We help each other. And so that really, really helps. But I found to back off of that, 8 hours a month, and Craig is going to, rejoice right here. Then we're in trouble, because 8 hours a month is just scratching the surface for anything amazing to happen. And so I think you can give people a little grace to work into that. But the other thing I found is just to let the pressure build, like to put on base camp, like, okay, guys, we have 43 things that we're going to cover tonight. And we have an hour and 15 minutes to do it. And wait for somebody to say, we got to have some more time. I recently started a new operational team for all of Grace Church, for the whole of Grace Church. And I started with a 3-hour meeting. And the first meeting, Pastor Larry said, gang, we're going to need a lot more time if we're going to get down to this. So we moved it up another few hours, and that's going to notch it up each time. But
that's helpful.
People spend a lot of time. How much, you can ask questions. How much, time do you spend, in your son's Pee Wee football league? Oh, Taylor, yeah, are you okay, man? Taylor just finished coaching freshman basketball at our high school, and the dude was there 35 hours a week plus travel on top of his normal 60-hour-a-week job. And so it's only reasonable then, if we're about the most important mission in the world and we're creating a movement of disciple making, that you would give your time to this. And so ask him to quit something.
Cool.
You're busy people, that's who you want, because they're not all just busybodies, but I'm talking about people that are successful. But this is a compelling mission. So I would say go for broke on that.
Something that's helpful is a lot of teams aren't operational teams and don't need to be operational teams. If you know the strategies you're implementing, that's a task team. So like if you're talking to Celebrate Recovery, that doesn't need an operational team, probably, maybe. I don't know enough about it, because they know what they do. They just got to figure out the task of it. So they meet as often as they need to get the work done. They don't necessarily, a lot of things don't need operational teams if they're under an operational team.
Helpful. Can I ask one more question? Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
No, I was just going to say a word of encouragement on this too. I would, and I had to say this to myself too in building teams, Trevor, is that the work that you're doing in building teams is the important work. And so I think a lot of times as leaders, we feel like we just have to constantly be sprinting, and this is a marathon. And there are times in a marathon where you got to get water and walk. And so be sure to give yourself grace too in your schedule. Like, I'm building teams, and just in this season, this is the important work. And so I may have to pull back on other things so that I don't burn out and get on the skids and all that. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Vincent, over here.
So my question is, you put a team together, you're super pumped. Then you realize maybe somebody on that team, you're like, oh, bleep, this was not the person to put on the team. Have y'all had experience in either adjusting that or lovingly letting somebody go? And how did that go?
Sometimes I've sent them names of other churches in the area and asked them to no. One way, and again, I'm not great at this, but when I've remembered to do it, it's paid off. When you ask people onto a team, ask them for a set amount of time. And so that there's a natural off ramp. You're asking them to experiment with you on if this is a good fit or not. So that's just one. I should take my own advice more, but that's one way to help.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all had experience with that, and I think the most helpful thing is if you can define the expectations of what is required to do that. So I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with the book Necessary Endings. That's how I would look at it, with that person, is to say, this is what you have to do, this is what we're looking for on this team. And so they're going to have, eventually, if they're really the wrong person, they're going to self-select off of that, because you're given the criteria for what it means to be. And I'm not talking about be there from start to finish. It's like, this is the type of engagement that is necessary. This is the type of, if you got somebody that's dominating, you can't do that. And then you have to invite people off the team. And I've never been on a team, a covenantal team, that there hasn't been some moments where you have covenant conversations, or probably all of them have someone that eventually is not on the team that started on the team.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Dion.
So we have recently had kind of a covenant break in our operational team. We've been building with Craig Robertson, with Coach Craig, this operational team. And one of our team members has drawn Craig and me into side triangulating conversations. And I didn't recognize it when it started to happen. And I'm now reflecting that I think that, and actually, someone on our team, because the other members started to sense something, said, I think we need to go back to our covenant. And so my question is, I'm trying to figure out my own vulnerability around this. As my operational team is going to meet in a few weeks, and I kind of want to throw that person under the bus. So let me just, admit that. And how do you do all of this in a healthy manner? And Jacob, you just said these covenantal conversation. So maybe just a little bit more coaching around that.
Well, I'll let one of those guys answer that directly. I think in a big picture, the hope is the longer we're doing this, we're in a part of a disciple making movement. And so we're going to have more disciples that can better live into this. Folks who are immature spiritually or not even a disciple of Jesus, of course we're going to have these instances. So like we said, we're 4.5 years into just cranking on. We realized, in the pandemic, we had been a fast-growing church that had not been making disciples of Jesus. So we really shifted that. So it's becoming more, I used to have that all the time. Every team, every team, the more disciples are made, the better that can be. And what we're seeing at Providence is the lower bar stuff we're having more trouble getting people to sign on for, and the higher bar things because more disciples have been made. But somebody else get more to that. I wanted to offer that as like an overarching thing. Like the more we're making disciples, the better this will go.
Our first operational team, half the people on it really shouldn't have been on it, and it was a mess. Craig would tell you, it was really a mess. And now we say, I want you to give a year. So when their year was over, they were done. But our first team, half of them were just more dysfunctional than anything else. And it took a while to work through that. So it takes time. Our team is awesome now, but it was rough. Yeah.
In our covenants, Dion, we have we put something in there intentionally about conflict and how we're going to handle it, and so it can be a one-on-one conversation, and then if it can't get resolved, it's like, well, let's take this to the team, and see what's going on. I found if I can just have the courage to bring it up, then God will intervene and help us out. It'll seem good to the Holy Spirit and us, but I would not be too afraid to, after trying to coach for a while, it may be just a bad fit, and you can't let that go on for too long, and because we're trying to teach people something they don't know about, but they might think they know about. I've had people tell me, well, I'll let a steel company. Remember a guy, and he was like, I know leadership, and Pastor, you sit down over there, and he was just large and in charge, and I was like, well, I want to share with you about spiritual leadership, and that's a whole different ballgame. I'm glad you ran a steel company. That's really cool. But we never could come to a place that worked out. And so I was like, well, it's been real. So you're done. And so we had to let people go off of teams, or sometimes it's finding a better fit. I remember we had a directional team meeting and somebody came in, it was like their 4th meeting, and they're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm here tonight. I can't wait to talk about this because the song we sang, the 3rd song 3 weeks ago, was totally something I didn't like. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Can you put it on the agenda? I'm like, no, we're not going to put that on the agenda. We're a directional team. If you want input on that, go join the band. And they meet together 30 hours a month, and they can help you out with that. And so you're in the wrong seat. And just those honest conversations, I'm being a little more snarky now, but than I am with people in the real life.
And a really cool thing, and Dion, you're one of the greatest leaders I've met. It's like once you do that, we had somebody on our team for a while that wasn't the right person on the team. And when you have to do those hard things and they leave, the rest of the people are like, we're for real, Oh, and then this whole thing happens because you've really honored the covenant. Yeah, the team jumps. Yeah.
They usually know before you.
Yes. Oh yeah, everybody knows.
If this may not be possible, but just this may be preventative, like Kim's heard me say this way too many times, if you think someone's going to be great, give them tasks first and see how they do at the task level. And then if they do well at the task level, promote them up. But task teams are great ways to look for people that can be on operational teams. But if you shoot someone straight to the strategy leadership level, you might find yourself surprised in a bad way. If you put them on task team first, you can watch them and go, yeah, this is going to be good.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Wes?
We just wrote that down.
Now, obviously, they are all going to be here until noon on Wednesday. And so even though it may not be a formal Q&A session, you know that everyone's approachable. So just continue to batter them with questions during breaks and other times like that. I want to Taylor said, I want to give a real-time example here. At our last gathering, I introduced you more so than just seeing her on the platform to Pastor Melissa, who has been appointed to plant the newest campus of Bay Hope Church, Bay Hope Trinity, and that process has started. And the very first thing that Pastor Melissa did was what? Build a team. And what's that team? It's our prayer team. How often have you met with them now?
We meet with them every other Thursday at a public library at where we hope the campus is going to be, and we're close to 30 people.
Yeah, that's so cool, and that's just started. And so the first reaction, I'm going to start this big new thing, this campus. I'm going to build a team. And there'll be a lot of other teams after the prayer team, but that's just kind of a real-time example, and we're grateful. Thank you, Pastor Melissa.